Hey everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Let's talk about stuff. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. So today I wanted to take some time to talk about Ted Lasso, the first season of the Apple TV series. I mentioned before that I wanted to talk about this show, so I've had the chance to sit down. I have actually watched the first two seasons on Apple TV. I just wanted to take some time to discuss the first season, and then down the road I might talk about the second season a little bit, kind of give my overall thoughts about it. I loved this show. One of my friends described this as being like a really good, wholesome show, and honestly, I would agree with that. It was really good. Of course, I'm a big fan of Jason Sudeikis. You know, he's from Kansas City, so I always love to see people representing their hometowns, and especially one that I'm from. So, been a pretty big fan of his for quite a long time. And from what I understand, he co-wrote this show along with Brandon Hunt, who also stars in the show too. But anyways, for those of you who haven't seen the show yet or may not be familiar with the story, essentially the plot is that Jason Sudeikis plays the title character Ted Lasso, a college football coach who basically is hired to coach a premier football team over in England for a team called AFC Richmond. And essentially he tries to get acclimated to not just the team and the players, but also the different culture being in London. Or being in England. So he's trying to, get used to that, trying to figure out, kind of trying to navigate his way through everything while trying to do his job effectively, as well as going through some pretty interesting personal issues as well. In a nutshell, that's basically the plot of the show. The first season is 10 episodes, and the second season, I think, is 12 episodes. So I binged this season in probably like less than a week. I think I watched about 2 episodes a day. I couldn't stop watching it. Like I said, really love this show. Kind of a few things I just wanted to get into just talking about it was, one, of course, is the acting, which, I feel like Jason Sudeikis is really proving to be an incredibly talented performer. I know he kind of got his start, I think, in SNL, as well as some minor roles in comedy movies a few years ago. Not only is he hilarious and does he have great comedic timing, but even in this show, he has some really good, intense, serious moments that he's able to deliver really well. And of course, I think in this show, it's won several awards, which it definitely deserves, in my opinion. It's received quite a bit of critical acclaim. I believe Jason Sudeikis, as well as the actress Hannah Waddington, who plays Rebecca, the owner of the AFC Richmond team, and then Brett Goldstein, who plays Roy Kent, one of my favorite characters in the show. Those three won for their performances. They won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Comedy Series, and then Sudeikis, I believe, won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a television series, musical or comedy. So, it's won quite a few other accolades and nominations, and it definitely deserves it. And really, honestly, everybody in this show, I think, does a fantastic job with their respective performances. I think those three are probably the ones that stuck out to me the most: Sudeikis, Waddington, and Goldstein. Brett Goldstein as Roy Kent. Roy Kent is like one of my favorite characters in the whole fucking show. He's just, every scene he's in, he's so great. One thing I love about his character that just cracks me up is how he just goes from one extreme to the next. Like there's a great scene where he is with his niece, and he's very crass and rude to most people in the show, but to his niece, like, even though he's kind of rude to her at times and kind of mean and, drops F-bombs on her constantly, he's still like actually genuinely kind to her, and it's just funny how he goes back and forth like that. And then a few other actors in the show. There's one actor in the show that I really liked was Jeremy Swift as Leslie Higgins, who's basically like he's kind of like Hannah's assistant, but he's also the director of, I think, operations or something for AFC Richmond. The actor Swift, he looks a lot like Stephen Colbert, I noticed. It's kind of funny, actually. I actually thought it was him for a split second when it first started. And then a few other notable mentions on the acting part. Phil Dunster plays Jamie Tart, who's kind of the young, arrogant player on AFC Richmond, who is kind of one of the antagonists of the season, in a sense. Like, there's a lot of tense moments between him and Ted Lasso, as well as him and Roy Kent throughout the season, where Ted's trying to get the team to warm up to him, and Jamie's kind of one of the last few people that kind of really takes what Ted tells him to heart. The idea in the show is that Ted is just such a wholesome, down-to-earth person. Like, he's almost kind of like if Ned Flanders was real, kind of. That's what he makes me think of, in a sense. Kind of has the look of Ned Flanders, in a way. Like, he's just this really happy-go-lucky guy who always sees the good in people. Even though, as we kind of see later in the show, this kind of sort of takes a bit of this has a negative impact on Ted and his personality a little bit later in the show, but I'll get into that later. That's really more... We see hints of that in the first season, but that's really more in the second season, which I'll get into that when I talk about season 2. And then, of course, Brandon Hunt, as I mentioned before, who plays Coach Beard. He's basically Ted Lasso's assistant coach and also his friend, which I found out that Hunt is also really good friends with Jason Sudeikis in real life. I actually saw some interviews with those two talking about the show and how they wrote it and stuff. I think Coach Beard might be one of my other favorite characters in the show. He's just this quiet, really calm, collected person who has sometimes he'll have these outbursts where he'll just kind of yell, like when he's coaching and stuff like that, but it's just great. Like, he's a man of few words, and it really fits him. I think Brandon Hunt plays the role very well. Another really great performance in the show is Nick Mohammed as Nathan Shelley, the team's he's the kit manager of the team. It's funny, his voice and even kind of the way I wouldn't say so much the way he looks, but kind of the way he sort of carries himself reminds me a lot of, for those of you that may have ever watched or listened to the Ricky Gervais show, he reminds me a lot of Carl Pilkington. I think his voice reminds me a lot of Carl in many ways. But yeah, I like Nate in this season. He has kind of a bigger moment in season 2 that I'll get into when I talk about that, but for now I'm just talking about how he is in season 1. And in season 1, he's definitely one of my favorite characters for sure. Like, he's this very timid person who doesn't really have a lot of confidence. And then, like, once Ted comes around, he kind of helps Nate kind of come out of his shell a little bit. Nate proves that he's actually pretty knowledgeable when it comes to football and actually helps Ted come up with some pretty good plays and ways to kind of manage the team a little bit more effectively. And so we kind of see him build up his confidence throughout the season, as well as kind of becoming friends with the team, even though in the beginning they kind of bully him in a sense, mainly because of Jamie Tartt's character. But more into that a little bit later. Then we have Juno Temple as Keely Jones. She's an ambitious model who at first is dating Jamie Tartt's character, but as the season goes on, she kind of gets involved with Roy Kent a little bit, and kind of an interesting relationship blossoms between those two. So, and then of course the side characters in the show are fantastic. Like, I love I think his name is James Lance as Trent Krim of The Independent. I love how when they introduce his character, they always call him that, like Trent Krim of The Independent, even because that's how he introduces himself when he's at the first press conference that Ted Lasso's at, and then he does it every time afterwards, and then that's how Ted addresses him, and it's so great. I love the 3 guys that hang out at the pub that Ted and Coach Beard go to all the time, and how, like, even though they kind of insult Ted in the beginning, but they are also kind of his friends in a sense. Like, they're actually kind of these decent guys, even though they can be kind of belligerent at times. It's just great. And then, of course, the pub owner, she's fantastic. I think her name is May. She's awesome. Like, there's so many great characters in this show. I love it. And all the characters just they have a way of being endearing, too, in a way. Even Jamie Tartt, even though he's kind of a douchebag in the beginning of the show, there's kind of a revelation about him later on where you do kind of start to sympathize with him a little bit. Like, once you kind of learn a little bit about his past and the things that have turned him into the person he is. I won't go into too much detail about that, but it kind of makes you see him in a different light, in a sense. But he does have a likability to him, in a sense. He does have his funny moments. And as he warms up to Ted Lasso and kind of comes around towards the middle to the end of the season, you do kind of start to like him a little bit more. And then, of course, Hannah Waddington as Rebecca Welton, the owner of AFC Richmond, who I guess I would consider her kind of the antagonist of the season, in a sense. Because she basically, her ex-husband, who they went through a nasty divorce with, he loves the club, and he used to be the owner of it, I believe. And so she basically just wants to ruin the club and destroy it. And so that's why she initially makes the decision to hire Ted Lasso, because she knows he has no experience, and she knows that most likely, at least she thinks, that he'll actually end up destroying the entire club, thereby, pissing her ex-husband off, which is what she wants. She basically just wants to burn it to the ground. But as the season goes on, she does slowly start to come over, and because of Ted's kindness and compassion towards her and towards everybody else and his wholesomeness, he does kind of slowly start to win her over, as well as the rest of the team. And that's kind of the main drive of the entire first season, is that you see these characters, a lot of whom are pretty negative and pretty mean to one another, including to Ted initially. They slowly start to come around as Ted's good nature starts to wear off on them a little bit. Rebecca is one of the last ones, but you do kind of see the change in her. One thing about her that I love, the dynamic between her and Ted, is that he comes into her office like every day, and this fucking cracked me up so much. He would come into her office every day, and he like makes her like these cookies or these biscuits, or he brings them to her in like this little box, and she keeps trying to figure out where they're from, but he won't tell her because then he won't be able to keep coming back into her office. And so she basically just goes crazy trying to figure out where he's getting them from. I think she even has like Higgins trying to figure out like what bakery or wherever he's buying those from. Then it's revealed later that Lasso actually makes them himself at home, which I thought was so funny. It's like, that's such a Ted move. I love it. Like, I love Ted Lasso's character. But yeah, like the characters, the acting in the show are great. There's some really good, strong, heartfelt moments, particularly from Hannah Waddington as Rebecca. Like, she's I looked her up, and she's actually a singer in real life too. And you do get to hear her sing quite a few times in this season, and she's amazing. But yeah, like she's phenomenal. A lot of the scenes with her and Ted, I think, are some of the emotional core of the first season. So in this season, it's revealed that that Ted essentially is kind of having some marital problems with his wife. And we actually see this in the very first episode, where he talks to her on the phone, and even though it doesn't really spell it out for the audience, it's pretty clear from that initial exchange that there's obviously some problems going on, and that the job is kind of the reason why he took it is so he could kind of give his wife some space and try to work things out with her, even though it's still clear that things there's some trouble in paradise. And that leads to some pretty interesting emotional moments from Ted Lasso, which Jason Sudeikis, I think, delivers very well. There's a lot of subtlety in his performance in this that I really like. Like, one thing that I was kind of wondering about was, okay, is Ted Lasso just going to be this happy-go-lucky guy the entire season, and is that really all we're going to see of him? But what I really like that the show does very well, and also that I think Sudeikis does very well, is it definitely gives us the sense that there is a lot more to this character than they initially let on. As the season goes on, and as Ted's marriage slowly starts to unravel, we definitely see the emotional turmoil that this is having on him, the emotional toll this is taking on him, and how that kind of comes into his coaching and doing his job. Another thing I really like about this season is that it doesn't do what I think a lot of shows would typically do, where when Ted first comes in and takes on the job of head coach of AFC Richmond, they don't immediately become great. They become a much better team as the season goes on, but they don't immediately just become champions. In fact, I think they lose the first few games after he becomes coach. And even though everybody keeps calling, they keep calling like Lasso like the worst names, like on the street, like there's like an old man who constantly just insults him and cusses him out. It's so funny what everybody calls him. I love that. Like his Lasso's reaction, the way he responds to people, like still trying to be nice even when they insult him, is just so fucking funny. It kills me every time. But I like that they don't just automatically make him a great coach from the very beginning, because again, he doesn't know anything about football. He doesn't know how to coach football. And so he's trying to learn it as he goes. And I really like that about it. Like, I mean, he picks it up pretty quickly, but I like that there is at least that initial challenge of trying to figure this out. There's a learning curve that he has to figure out, him and Coach Beard. And again, Lasso and Coach Beard, I swear to God, I love those two. They're so great together. You can definitely tell that Brandon Hunt and Jason Sudeikis are friends in real life, because the way they play off each other in the show is so great, and especially the dynamic they have with Nate's character is so great. Like, kind of as he kind of slowly comes out of his shell, and they try to encourage him to speak up and to be more confident. I love that. It's great. And then a lot of the character development in this season is really great too. Like with Roy Kent's character, he's very gruff and a very grumpy person in the beginning, and he pretty much remains that way throughout the most of the season, but he is one of the first players that actually does kind of start to take what Ted says to heart. And he's actually the first guy that sticks up for Nate, which is a pretty heartwarming scene, I think. He stands up to Jamie Tartt's character, who Jamie's kind of the guy who tells the other players to keep, harassing Nate and making his life a living hell. And Roy's kind of the first guy that stands up to Jamie and tells him and the other guys to back off. And it's kind of cool that you get to see Roy Kent be the first guy to do this, to really kind of take that plunge, and which Ted kind of predicts. I love the line Ted says. He says something along the lines of, like, if there's anybody's heart we're going to change, it's going to be that man right there. I love that about Ted. And what I love about it, too, is that he annoys Roy Kent every time. It's like, I think at one point during this season, Roy kind of figures out what Ted's doing. Like, he kind of figures out that Ted's kind of, in a sense, manipulating him, but to be a better person, and it just pisses Roy off. I fucking love Roy. Roy kills me. Just every line that guy has is just great. I love there's a scene where he goes to visit a bunch of school kids, and he's supposed to give a speech or something like that, but he's basically just like, fuck it, let's just go outside and just play soccer. I love that. His character is just so great. He does not want to deal with anybody's bullshit, including Lasso. I love that about it. The characters in this show they're so fantastic. So, but yeah, like I said, the show's won several awards. Like I said, mainly Jason Sudeikis, Hannah Waddington, and then of course Brett Goldstein, for Roy Kent. It's won quite a few awards and nominations, and I can definitely see why, for sure. The acting is definitely top notch. The writing is great. I love the dialogue the characters have. It can be a little, I don't want to say cringy at times. It can be a little over the top, but I think this is definitely supposed to be like a feel-good show. It's supposed to be a show that it's supposed to kind of give you a good, like, heartwarming feeling, and I think it does it very, very well. Very interesting. Oh, I just looked this up. I didn't know this. Apparently, the second episode was directed by Zach Braff. The second episode called Biscuits. Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that. Very interesting indeed. I didn't even know Zach Braff was involved in this show. Huh. Yeah, but anyways, I can definitely understand, like, why it's gotten a lot of the praise that it's gotten. I know several people who were talking about this show. Like, a few of my friends were talking about this show quite a bit, and they kept telling me that, like, it was, one of the best, like, heartfelt shows that they had seen in many years, and I have to agree with them. I would say it pretty much won me over from day one. I think by, like, the second episode, I was pretty much hooked, and even the first episode, I found myself really enjoying it quite a bit. And then, let's see. Oh, yeah, I was looking at my phone real quick. Someone sent me a text, so got distracted. I should not do that during the podcast, not professional. But yeah. And then of course the comedy was, it's really funny. Like, there were some laugh out loud moments in the show, mainly just because of the characters and just the interactions that they have. I love, there's just some of the lines that Ted has with some of the players. Like, there's a scene where he's talking to Jamie Tartt's character, and he asks him, like, just kind of a hypothetical, like, he goes, "Hey Jamie, if you could be any animal in the world, like, if you could be a lion or a panda, which would you be?" And Jamie's just like, "Coach, I'm me. Why would I ever want to be anything else?" And then Lasso's just like, "I don't think you realize how healthy that is, Jamie." It's like, it's almost kind of like Lasso doesn't realize that Jamie's just kind of being a smartass and kind of a conceited douchebag to him, but it's just that's kind of what makes it so fucking funny. And then I love, there's kind of this, it's a reoccurring joke. Well, I say reoccurring, it only happens twice, but it's like, it happens in the very first episode, and I think the very last episode of the season. It's when Ted first meets Rebecca's character, and she takes him out to the press conference. And so, like, and of course they don't tell him about this, so he's pretty much blindsided. And he goes to drink, like, what he thinks is just regular water, but it's actually like it's like sparkling water or something like that. Like, it's like really fizzy, and he just, like, spits it everywhere. And then, like, later on he has, like, just regular water, and he's like, let's see, I can handle that as long as it doesn't have the bubbles, I'm fine. And then later in the very last episode, they give him that water again, the sparkling water or whatever, and he spits it all over Rebecca by accident. I love that. That kills me. I love that reoccurring joke in there. The funny thing is, I think it was kind of a good move to have it at the first episode and the last episode of the season, because I completely forgot about it. And then as soon as it happened, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, the bubbles. He can't take the bubbles. That's so funny. And then again, like, Roy Kent has some hilarious moments. Some of the funniest moments with Roy, I think, are with his niece. Some of the moments with him and his niece fucking cracked me up so much. Like, when he goes to her school and teaches, he kind of goes and plays soccer with the kids, and then there's a scene where he basically, like, yells at Ted Lasso and then walks away. His niece walks next to him, and he still holds her hand. even though he literally just chewed out Lasso and gave him a thrashing, like he holds her hand like a concerned parent. It's just the timing of that scene is just it's so fucking funny. And then of course Nate's character, he has some really gold moments too in the first season as well. Like there's a scene where he's packing the bus, he's throwing all the bags in there, and he's kind of getting them in the cargo hold underneath where the seats are, and he because he's just so quiet and people kind of forget that he's there, he gets in there to kind of fix one of the bags, and then they close the door on him and he gets stuck, and it's so great. But then I love, like, as the bus is taking off, like, Lasso actually has the bus stop so he can go out there to get Nate. Like, he remembered him right before they were leaving. I love that part. Yeah, Nate's character in the first season is great. Again, there's kind of there's a big reveal with his character in the second season that I won't go into too much here, but I'll talk about that when I talk about season 2. But season 1, Nate is definitely one of my favorite characters in the entire season. I like his character a lot. And yeah, like again, like I said, even Jamie's character he has some pretty good moments too. Like I like when they have like the auction where they're auctioning off players to people, and Jamie's trying to get Keely to get him to bet on him, and they have like this little argument there, and so she doesn't want to, and so like that scene's pretty great. And then like yeah, he has some funny moments in the show that I think Phil Dunster delivers pretty well, and not only that, but he has a pretty good heartfelt moment later on in the season too, where we kind of learn more about his past and kind of his upbringing and his parentage that kind of helped turn him into who he is. Mainly when he's talking about his father, and the way Dunster delivers that line, it's when Jamie kind of finally starts to get closer with the team and starts to really kind of bond with them. And it's a really good heartfelt moment. They could have made his character one-dimensional and not very interesting because of that, but they actually made him a fairly interesting character. And by the end, you actually kind of he becomes much more fascinating, and you kind of want to learn more about him. And there's a big plot twist with him later in the season that, again, I'll kind of let you discover for yourself if you watch the show. But yeah, it's another couple things that I really like about the show that it tackles is I think the show does a good job of talking about toxic masculinity, because of course when Ted gets there, he is in a situation where he's in another country, so he's already kind of trying to figure out the culture and the customs of that country. But also too, there's a great scene where he almost crosses the street because he keeps forgetting that traffic comes from the other direction, and Coach Beard has to literally stop him, and he has to keep reminding him, "You've got to look the other way, Coach." So that was kind of a great example of like how Ted Lasso is struggling to really kind of learn and understand the new life that he has. And then of course, on top of that, learning his new job too, and learning to coach a sport that he really doesn't understand very well. I love there's a great joke where he still doesn't understand what offsides is in soccer, so he kind of keeps. I think at one point he actually asks the ref, or one of the officials, like, "Hey, how is that offside?" And then he's like, "No, I'm being serious. How is that offside? I still don't get it." And it's like, I think Coach Beard explains it to him a couple times, and he still doesn't understand. And I love that about his character. Like he's so honest, like almost to a fault, but you can't help but love the guy for it. But yeah, anyways, he's dealing with that. He's dealing with a town of people that are, they're avid soccer fans, and they tear him apart whenever he doesn't do his job well. And the team, it's a team of, of guys who they get onto each other when they don't do their job well, and I think the show does a really good job of kind of showing the effects that toxic masculinity can have on individuals. Like again, kind of going back to the example of when Nate's being picked on by several of the other teammates, or the team members, and Jamie kind of eggs them on, and it doesn't stop until Roy Kent kind of has to get involved and stop it. And eventually the team does warm up to Nate, and they do kind of become better friends with him, and actually they show him a lot more respect towards the end, especially as he gets promoted later on in the season. But it does take a little bit of time for that to happen, but it kind of shows, like, you kind of see like how Nate's timidness starts to disappear as as the team starts to accept him, and as he kind of gains more confidence, you kind of see but in the beginning you can see like the effects that toxic masculinity had on his character. And so, yeah, and there's also, you kind of see how that affects Ted Lasso as well too, which again, I think they kind of go into that a little bit more in season 2, but you kind of see the impact that it has on Ted Lasso as well, where it's clear that his character is going through some issues of his own, but he doesn't want to talk about it with everybody because he wants to he kind of wants to keep it to himself. And I think he kind of has this idea that he needs to keep up this persona, of Ted Lasso, which that's another thing that I think the show tackles pretty well is the topic of mental health. So in the show, it is revealed that Ted's marriage, so just since I'm already talking about spoilers anyway, that he eventually does split up with his wife. But what I like about the way they handle it is that it's not, I would think that most shows would handle this in the sense that this would be like the final big reveal in the season, like this would be the last thing and it would kind of end on a cliffhanger. But his divorce actually happens I think pretty early, like around episode 4, something like that, 3 or 4, somewhere around there. And basically after that, he has to kind of learn to just sort of live with the fact that his marriage is over. He still keeps in contact with his wife and his son, and tries to have Zoom meetings with them and, for birthdays and Christmas and stuff, even though it's clear that this is, taking an emotional toll on Ted because he can't actually be there with his son in person. But he doesn't really talk about this with anybody, at least not at first. But we can see that this is clearly having an impact on him. And I think the show does a good job of kind of showing, it does a good job of addressing, mental health issues, kind of like this, the idea that, it's good to reach out for help. It's not good to stay quiet if you feel like you're suffering, if you feel like there's something wrong and you need to talk to somebody about it. Again, I know I sound like a broken record here. They go into this more in season 2, which I'll get into when I talk about that. But yeah, it's there. And later in the season, Ted has kind of a panic attack when the team is at a club having a good time, and I think it's fairly late in the season. And I think it's kind of the culmination of when the stress of his new job, living in a new city, and then of course in a new country, and then of course his split with his wife. You can kind of see it's all kind of accumulated and the weight's kind of crushing down on him, and we see the effect that this has on Ted. It's a pretty sad scene, and it's definitely strange to see his character. It's weird when you see his character finally kind of lose it in this scene, because you're so used to seeing him having this happy-go-lucky attitude and kind of seeming to have everything together. But it kind of shows you that beneath the surface, sometimes things are not always as they seem, and even the happiest of people can be going through some serious emotional problems. But I think the show does a good job of tackling that. And again, like I said, in the second season, I think they do a great job of addressing this, I think, a little bit in more detail. So it goes in a direction that I kind of applaud the show for doing this, for having the guts to kind of go in this direction, because I think a lot of shows wouldn't. And I appreciate Ted Lasso for taking the time to do that, to address mental health in that way. Because honestly, I go to therapy, and I'm an advocate for mental health and for taking care of yourself. I'll always be an advocate for that, for self-improvement. I think, I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of when it comes to that. I think that if you do feel like that there are things in your life that you maybe need help for, that you should try to get professional help, because there are people out there who can help you, who are qualified to help you, and more than anything, they actually want to help you because that's their job. So I'll always be an advocate for mental health. I'm glad that I started going to a therapist. I think it helped me out a lot. So I'm glad that the show decides to tackle this subject. It doesn't get super in depth with it, but it does at least address it. And I think it's something that a lot of shows anymore don't really have the guts to do. So I definitely applaud the show for doing that, for sure. But yeah, as far as my final thoughts on this show, yeah, strong recommendation. If you haven't watched it yet, definitely give it a try. I think the 3rd season comes out later this year, I think in the summer, so I'm definitely going to check that out when that releases. But yeah, very good show, very heartfelt, good comedy, upbeat, but also is willing to lay down some pretty serious emotional moments from time to time that I think sometimes might catch you off guard, just kind of given the tone of the series. But yeah, I think there's definitely something here for everybody. So definitely check it out and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys, that's pretty much all I have for today. So once again, if you guys would, just feel free to like and subscribe. Follow me on Spotify, Anchor, and YouTube. It really means a lot to me. All right, guys, later.